Hello, everyone, and welcome. Our channel narrates the life stories of our viewers from all around the world. To protect individuals' privacy, names are sometimes altered in these stories. I'm Lucy, and I'm 23 years old. I graduated from a small town and attended university for a few months, but I didn't get into the major I wanted, and soon I got tired. The university was far, and my family wasn't happy about me traveling so much. With all the expenses, I couldn't afford to stay in the dorms. So I decided to withdraw from university. I wanted to learn a skill so I could earn money and cover my own expenses. I had always dreamed of becoming a hairdresser. Even as a child, I wanted to do hair and makeup for my sister. My father initially objected, saying that a beauty salon wasn't a suitable place for a single young girl like me. But after a lot of persistence, he finally agreed and I started training at a salon. After some training courses, I managed to get a job at a well known salon in our town. From the very start, my creativity blossomed because of my passion, and people were drawn to me. They trusted only me to do their hair and makeup. Some time passed until the salon manager wanted to talk to me. She said that her brother had seen me a few times at the salon and liked me and wanted to get to know me better. I wasn't sure what would happen if I told her I had never dated anyone before and that my family was very strict. Maybe she'd make fun of me. But I took a leap and told her. Contrary to my worries, she was excited and said that's probably why her brother fell for me. I finally agreed to meet him, though I was incredibly nervous. The kind of stress I thought I'd only felt in university exams. But now I could even hear my own heartbeat, loud enough that I thought others might notice. Arash was a guy who had been working since he was young. Now he owned a large cattle farm in town, had a car, a house, and was ready to settle down and get married. After seeing me, he had made up his mind. We met twice and talked, and then he asked me to my family's permission for a formal proposal. I was a bit embarrassed, but I explained everything to my mom. I'm not someone who makes decisions independently or falls in and out of love easily. Everything I did was under my parents' watch. My mom was thrilled. Arash was wealthy and had a good reputation in the neighborhood. So she quickly informed my dad and they arranged the proposal. That evening, I was tearing up a plastic bag out of anxiety. It's been a habit since childhood whenever I was nervous. I would destroy any plastic around the house, which always annoyed Mom. Hearing the greetings from the living room, I straightened my blue dress and checked myself in the mirror one last time, then walked to the kitchen. When I arrived, my sister laughed and hugged me, which made me feel a bit calmer. The tea tray in my hands felt unusually heavy. My sister told me to first offer tea to the Arash parents, then to mine, and finally to Arash. I did as she instructed, but something made me freeze, standing there in the middle of the room with the tray in my hands. There were two Arash, but one was in a suit and the other was wearing a shirt. When they noticed my hesitation, a girl I didn't know started laughing. I turned to her and she apologized, saying she'd experienced the same thing herself. Arash and Arshia were twin brothers. Once I understood, I quickly snapped back to reality and continued offering tea. Everyone burst out laughing and I was dying of embarrassment. Then I sat down beside my mom, and after a bit of conversation among the adults, my dad finally told me to guide Arash to a room so we could talk aloud. Before this moment, I had mentally rehearsed everything I wanted to say. But now, sitting face to face with him, I froze and couldn't think of anything to say. Arash, on the other hand, spoke openly about his desires, needs, and abilities and asked me to do the same. With some hesitation, I answered him. That night, I couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about a future with Arash. Sometimes I felt excited, sometimes sad, and sometimes anxious. After the wedding and various ceremonies that were popular in our culture, Arash and I finally started living in our own home. Our home was the upper floor of Arash's brother's house, and every day the two of them would go work together. In the beginning, I was too shy to visit Arash's sister in law, but she came over a few times, which helped us grow closer, and soon it was easier for us to visit each other. Unlike the stories my mom used to tell about her own marriage, our life didn't start with fights or disagreements. I complained a lot, but Arash was incredibly patient and always there to comfort me. Some time passed, and I found out that Arshia and his wife were having issues and couldn't have a child. I felt sorry for them. But at the same time, my mother in law was putting pressure on Arash and me to have a grandchild for her. I didn't want to have a baby right at the beginning of our marriage. I heard she had even told Arshia that he should consider marrying someone else, as if she was certain the issue wasn't with her son and was willing to jeopardize their relationship. I didn't have a good feeling about her. She was always interfering in our lives and expected us to respect her every word. Arash suggested we limit our visits to avoid problems, and I appreciated how much he cared about our life together. For a short period, Arash and Arshia faced financial difficulties, and the work stress was affecting them. I decided to return to the salon and start working again so that Arash wouldn't feel lonely and we could ease our expenses. I worked for a few days and everything was fine until one night when my mother in law suddenly came over. She told Arash, "You call this a wife? Look at how dirty your house is." I could see the embarrassment on Arash's face, but I didn't understand why he was ashamed. I had been at work and our home was a bit messy, but that didn't justify her insulting me without knowing anything. Each time I wanted to say something, Arash would apologize on her behalf and tell me to be patient and not respond. Days went by and I became more mature and understood better how to respond to each behavior and word. When Arshia's wife got pregnant, he was overjoyed and I was genuinely happy for them. They had worked hard to have a child and now they were going to be parents. They threw a big party inviting all their relatives to announce the pregnancy. My mother in law was so ecstatic that she fainted a few times. Arash and I were thrilled and took on all the responsibilities for the event. Once we were confident everything for the gathering was taken care of, the four of us sat together. I wanted a drink to let go of everything for the night and just think about the good days ahead. I knew that starting the next day, my mother in law would likely be on my case, wanting a grandchild from Arash and me too. That night, after Arshia and I insisted, Arash and Arshia's wife finally agreed and we all had a drink together. After drinking, I felt so warm that I wanted to take off my clothes. I went to the kitchen to splash some water on my face. When I came back, I sat down beside Arash. He closed his eyes, and as I sat down, he silently took my hand and led me to the room upstairs. I wasn't really aware of anything. As soon as we reached the room, without realizing we weren't in our own room, I tossed my clothes aside and fell onto the bed. My actions brought a spark to Arash's eyes. He slowly came towards me and lay down beside me. His behavior was unusual. I had never seen Arash with such excitement and passion. An indescribable feeling washed over me, making me even more willing to give myself over to the moment. With intense passion, I enjoyed each moment more than the last. Afterward, I was so exhausted that I quickly fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of knocking. I opened the door and came face to face with Arash. I quickly glanced back at the bed and saw Arshia lying there. From his distressed state, I realized a mistake. My sister in law was crying. Both of them had mistakenly gone to the wrong rooms last night. It was a source of embarrassment for all of us, and I felt most responsible. I had been the one to insist on the drinks that led to this. Arshia was trying to console his wife, while Arish and I remained silent, each lost in our own thoughts. I kept worrying about what would happen if my mother in law found out. But Arish and Arshia had both agreed to keep it between them, so they didn't seem concerned. It seems that both of them made this decision without thinking or wanting our opinion. I realized this when we went back to our home. It had been about a week since things hadn't been going smoothly in our relationship. I felt that Arash's pride and dignity were hurt, but that wasn't the case. When he came himself to fix our relationship and issues, he said he wasn't upset and had made the choice himself. He said that ever since he was single, he had wanted to do something like this after getting married. He asked me not to be upset and not feel bad about it. When I thought about his words, I came to the same conclusion he had. It was something that just happened, and there was nothing I could do now. I even found a sense of peace from that relationship, so there was no reason for me to feel bad. When my husband himself had planned for this, it seemed that it's okay. Arshia and his wife had reached the same conclusion we had, and our interactions went back to how they were before. Both families had decided that we should go on a trip to improve our mood. On the trip, Arash and Arshia spoke openly, without embarrassment, about what had happened. When Arash and Arshia spoke, their eyes sparkled, and from their tone, one could sense their happiness and excitement. I wanted this to happen one more time, but I was afraid to say it. After all, Arshia's wife was pregnant and she might not react well, or Arash might be hurt by it, so I stayed silent. When we arrived at our main destination, Arash's family villa, Arshia's wife and I started preparing lunch, and the men went shopping. I wanted to know how Arshia's wife felt about that experiences we'd had, so I tried every way possible to get her to talk. After much effort in connecting with her, I managed to understand her feelings. Her feelings were similar to mine. We both wanted another experiences like that, but this time consciously and knowingly. I had decided to experience that feeling again with Arshia without telling Arash. I knew that unlike Arash, Arshia had a wild nature, and since his wife was pregnant, she couldn't participate in this, and that he'd been feeling deprived lately. When I was sure Arash was asleep, I went towards the bathroom and then quickly put on a nice outfit, put on some makeup, and quietly left the room. I stood outside Arshia and his wife's room, and just as I was about to knock, I heard Arshia's voice and diverted my path toward the main bathroom in the hallway. I quietly opened the bathroom door and stepped in, surprising Arshia. At first, he thought I was there by mistake because I was sleepy, But when he realized I hadn't made a mistake, he started with excitement again. I felt like that night was the best night of my life. The pleasure that blossomed within me made me not want anything more. After we finished, we both needed sleep. When I returned to my room, Arash wasn't in bed. I was scared, feeling like he had understood everything and would surely be angry. Hearing the sound of water surprised me. Could Arash have woken up in the middle of the night to take a shower? I knew he didn't like going to sleep right after those kinds of activities and would definitely take a shower, but we hadn't been together. I shrugged it off. It was better to pretend to be asleep as quickly as possible so he wouldn't start questioning me. That way, there was less chance of being found out. A little later, I felt him come out of the bathroom. When he lay down next to me, he smelled different, like a perfume he'd never worn before. I was deep in my thoughts when I fell asleep without realizing it. The next morning, Arshia was happy and cheerful, wanting us to go out and explore a bit. I agreed, but his wife said she couldn't walk much because of her pregnancy and declined. And I said he had things to do, so it was better for Archie and me to go on our own. As soon as we left the villa, I held his hand and together we headed to the beach. We created so many beautiful, memorable moments. We played so much that we lost track of time and sat by the sea. And I gently rested in Arcia's arms, silently gazing at the sea. Arcia stroked my hair a little and said, "That night I went crazy for you. I wanted you. I didn't want to take advantages of you without telling you, but I also couldn't let you go. I truly love you and want you to be with me forever." I looked into his face and said, "I'm very happy with the experiences we've had, and I don't want them to end." And then both of us started heading toward the villa, and when we arrived, we had separated from each other. Hearing strange sounds from inside the house, we turned very quietly. Arcia noticed his wife and Arash's situation before I did, so he signaled me to come closer to him. Seeing them make me reach the highest degree of hate, and I wished I could experience that feeling with Arcia right then. Arcia quickly took my hand and led me to the last gazebo in the villa's yard, where things began. After a sweet and passionate experience, we rested for a while and then went back inside. Arash and Arcia's wife had also finished, and none of us said anything, nor were we upset with each other. I was sure that both Arash and Arcia's wife were aware of what was happening between me and Arcia. A few days passed and I began to feel dizzy and nauseous. I thought it was just due to the trip and the change in environment, but my condition was worsening. So I didn't say anything to anyone, just took some painkillers and tablets and tried to manage it. But the issue didn't go away. Throughout the return journey, I felt ill, and even after we got back, I felt so bad that Arish had to take me to the hospital. There, the doctor told me that I was 2 weeks pregnant. It was hard for me to believe that I was going to be a mother. My mind was consumed with questions about whose child this was. I didn't want Arash to be troubled by this, but it seemed he was already worried. He suggested we do a DNA test to clarify everything. I couldn't say anything, but I had informed Arcia as well. Like me and Arash, he was anxious, not wanting his reputation and dignity to be questioned. I didn't want to think about anything and had told Arash that I wanted to terminate the pregnancy, but he strongly disagreed, saying I shouldn't do that. Finally, I agreed to go through with the test. Arshia and Arash and I were sitting and waiting together. Arash had his head in his hands, and Archie was tapping his foot on the floor. I tried to calm myself by pacing around the clinic while we waited for our turn. Hearing that it would take 2 to 3 weeks for the test results frustrated me, and I felt like I wouldn't survive the stress of waiting that long. Arash and Arshia were no better off than I was. Suddenly, after knowing how long the results would take, Arash went to the reception desk and promised the clerk a large sum of money to expedite the results. When we returned home, my mom and sister had come to congratulate us. I didn't want anyone to know about the pregnancy in this situation, but it was unavoidable. My mom had told everyone, and the whole family was gathered, celebrating the news of our baby and Arash's brother's child. I didn't know what to do. I felt confused and overwhelmed. Finally, after 10 days, I received a call that the results were ready for pickup. I didn't tell either Arash or Arshia and went to the clinic on my own. After receiving the results, I went to the doctor, who explained everything to me. I was relieved to find out that the baby was indeed Arash's, and I wasn't going to have to terminate the pregnancy. I immediately called Arash to share the news and reassure him. After hearing the news, he arrived home with 3 big boxes of sweets, visibly moved and with tears of joy in his eyes. Arshio was also happy to hear the news and said he felt at ease now. It was finally time for everyone to know. Since finding out the baby is a boy, my mother-in-law had been around me constantly, doting on me like never before. I spoke with Arash about moving to a new home. Now that God had given us such a great blessing, I didn't want to be ungrateful or return to the past. I wanted to be a good mother now that I was becoming one. So my child would always be proud of me, and I even got Arash to promise that he would no longer have any contact with Ashia's wife, and that he would keep his distance from her. He agreed without hesitation, which made me very happy. With the help of my mom, sister, and Arash, we were able to move our things to the new house within a few days. The past didn't matter to me anymore. I just wanted to build a good future. I needed to distance myself from the past, from people who brought back memories, and even from places that revived old memories. Even though those memories were pleasant and enjoyable, at some point they no longer felt right. I was constantly worried that Arash might still be in contact with Arshia's wife. Because of that, I asked Arshia to keep an eye out and be my ally in this. I even laughed at myself when I talked about a sibling-like bond with Arshia. At times, I even despised myself for it, but I had no choice. I had to adapt to circumstance. Pregnancy hormones had made me more sensitive and suspicious, so much so that I had followed him a few times and even argued with him several times about the different perfumes on his clothes. I was afraid of what might happen to me. I didn't want my child to grow up without a father's presence, or for his father's actions to create a negative feeling in him. It seemed as though Arash was aware of my feelings and everything I was doing, because one night he decided that we should go out and talk. That night he swore by everything dear to him that he couldn't even imagine mentioning anyone other than the mother of our child. He said that since he found out we were expecting, life had become so sweet and meaningful to him that he would come home early in the evenings and leave later in the mornings just to spend more time with me and his son. Hearing his words made me feel powerful and proud. I believed him completely and felt that he was telling the truth. He had no reason to lie, and I was certain about his feelings toward our child. I knew he loved him so much that he was even willing to move our homes and leave behind people like Ashia's wife and everyone else. just like I had left everything behind at the peak of my emotions. Despite being filled with excitement and wonder, I had stepped away from everything for the sake of the baby inside me and to keep my life together. I had distanced myself from everything to avoid any further problems. Sometimes, when I thought about Arshia and our relationship, a sense of guilt would flood over me. It was as if God was still showing His love for me, for both me and this precious gift He had given us. He had saved my life from a dark past with an uncertain end. And with Sohrab's birth, my son, everything had only improved. Arshiel's child had also been born, and using the excuse of setting up a new workshop branch, they had moved to an island to live. I thought it was a good decision. The less we saw each other, the less we were hurt, especially with our children, who were now slowly growing up. We couldn't cling to the past anymore. My son's sweet little antics would bring my mom over to our house every day. And Arash rarely went to the dairy farm anymore. He spent most of his time with me and his son. I was thankful to God for all the blessings He had given me, for all the times I was lost, but He set me back on the right path, not letting my life fall apart or the bond of love and affection between me and Arash unravel. Now I was finally experiencing the true meaning of commitment and real love. Though it felt late, I believed it was never too late to start afresh.